If you're a filmmaker, a content creator, or a storyteller of any kind, it probably goes without saying that you want to tell good stories. The type of stories that have some sort of significance, that inspire and make a difference. The type of story that sticks with you. I know that I have a desire to tell good stories and to be continually improving in the craft of storytelling. Now, I'm no expert, but I have learned a handful of things over the past few years, so I thought I would make this video and share 5 tips for how to tell better stories and a few things to consider when starting a new project. And I should probably add that these are things that I've learned from the documentary and nonfiction type of projects that I've worked on. I definitely think that some of these concepts and ideas can be applicable to narrative and other types of storytelling, but it's things that I've learned along the way from making some mistakes and getting a few things right during the documentary and nonfiction type of projects that I have the most experience working on. At the core of every good story is a strong character or strong characters that help move the story along. A protagonist that the audience can connect to and relate to and help drive the story. And along with strong characters, there also needs to be a conflict presented. Now, this conflict can be an external conflict, like a problem that is trying to be solved or someone that's trying to be found, but the conflict can also be an internal conflict, like a decision or doubt or a fear that needs to be overcome. And I really think it's best if there's an internal conflict that parallels with an external conflict, some sort of fear or doubt that is holding a character back and presents an extra obstacle along with the external conflict that they're facing. And without a conflict, all we really have is a sequence of events and nothing to really drive or motivate our characters. Character stories are also a lot easier to tell than stories about a topic or an idea. I definitely think that topics and ideas can make for great stories, but oftentimes these types of stories need various characters to help drive the story along. I think that one mistake I made on the Lebanon documentary that I produced a few years ago was not really having super clear and defined characters. I went knowing that the Syrian refugee crisis was the topic that I was making a film about, and I interviewed several different people along the way, but I really never developed them as characters. The audience never really got to see who these people were that I was interviewing. They never got an inside look into their lives. Characters can still explain ideas and events that are going on, but without that strong personality or that relatable aspect, it's hard for an audience to make a dynamic connection with a character and to really pull them in. If you've looked into storytelling at all, you've probably heard the phrase, well, it needs a beginning, middle, and an end. And I think that that is really obvious, and I also think that that is not helpful because beginning, middle, and end doesn't really mean anything when you really think about it. I think that every story needs a conflict, a journey, and a payoff. There needs to be something that happens that is worth overcoming, a conflict, and characters that drive that conflict. There needs to be a journey, which is the process in overcoming that conflict. And then there needs to be some sort of payoff at the end, which is the climax of the movie. It's the pinnacle or the finish. And it's the thing that oftentimes is the make or break of a good story with how the payoff is. It leaves you wanting more, it's a cliffhanger, or it has a really satisfying finish that wraps the whole thing up. The more relatable a character is, the harder a conflict will seem. And the harder that a conflict seems, the easier it is to have a strong and satisfying payoff. So starting with a character, understanding that there is going to be a conflict and figuring out what that conflict is, and then following that character through the journey is what is required to have a satisfying payoff at the end. With documentary storytelling specifically, it's best to go in planned and prepped, knowing who your characters are and what the situation is that you're going into. But oftentimes it requires a level of flexibility that can be a little bit nerve-wracking, as the journey that these characters go on can take some unexpected twists and turns along the way. And to me, that's the fun part about documentaries, is to follow people in real life as they go through real life journeys. But it also requires a level of flexibility and openness to wherever the journey will take you. Sometimes telling a good story is more than just the delivery, and it can even be more than the character and the ideas behind them. Sometimes telling a good story involves listening and learning yourself. If you go into a story assuming that you're the expert, you won't allow that story to take on the life that it needs to in order to stick with the audience and to really have the lasting impact that you want. You need to allow the characters in your story to take on a life of their own and to breathe a little bit in front of you. One example of this is when I went to the Congo. I got a chance to follow my friend Freddie around for about a week. And he taught me a lot of things that I sort of had an idea about, but I definitely would have missed had I gone in assuming that I had known the answers to these things. He taught me that consumerism has tangible side effects for other people. And he taught me what it means to be a blessing to others. I think had I gone into that project knowing or assuming that I knew that yes, consumerism is bad and yes, blessing other people is a good thing, I would have missed a lot of the little details and lessons that he was teaching me along the way. And since I had the camera in my hand and I had put the microphone on him, I would have missed those little moments as well. Does this story provoke something? Is there a type of feeling or reaction that you're trying to elicit from the audience? I think it's these types of questions that help separate art from entertainment. Now, I don't think that entertainment is wrong or that there's anything bad about providing some sort of reprieve from their daily lives. And I certainly think that good stories and art can and should be entertaining. But I think that good stories have the ability to change people's perspective and have a lasting impact. And I think if we want to tell these types of stories, then something needs to be provoked. Are we willing to cross the aisle and engage with someone who might not have agreed with us before? For me in Lebanon, I went at the height of the Syrian refugee crisis. And coming back, it was so frustrating and disappointing to talk to so many Americans who just outright dismissed the Syrian refugee crisis. But it was getting to tell their stories and getting to put that in front of people in a way that they hadn't seen before that really got people to think and start having a different conversation with me about that topic. I know that good stories have the ability to provoke in a good way. I think it's just a question of if we're willing to go there. Going along with that idea, not only should your stories that you're telling be working on your audience to provoke something, but hopefully telling that story and working on that project is also working on you. I think that good stories should not only have an impact on your audience, but it should also have an impact on you. So I think when you're working on a project and you're telling that news story, ask yourself what's different about you. What are you learning and what are you growing from that project? You are the closest thing to the subjects that you are interviewing or the characters that you are developing in your story outside of those people themselves. So if you aren't being moved and changed by that story, then how can you expect your audience to move and change from that story? I think that in order to get there, it requires going through a few of the steps that I talked about earlier. Being able to listen and to learn. Understanding what things can and should be provoked from the story. And then being open and willing to change yourself. I really am a believer in the power of storytelling, and I absolutely believe that it has the ability to make a difference in the world. It's why I'm so passionate about storytelling and filmmaking, and I'm guessing it's why you love it as well. I really hope that this video can help you out in your journey as a filmmaker or a storyteller, and I'm honored that you are here. Thanks guys for watching, and I would love it if you would consider hitting the like button and the subscribe button below. It really is the best way to help me support this channel. Thanks so much, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.